The morning mist clung to the Swiss landscape like a translucent veil, softening the edges of Geneva's precision-engineered research complex. Captain Emily Rodriguez stood motionless, her weathered hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the horizon, where technology and atmosphere merge. Solar-powered sensors hummed quietly, their array of sophisticated detection equipment poised to capture every microscopic detail of the incoming vessel. Rodriguez knew this was more than just another diplomatic mission. Something fundamental was about to change. Zorax's ship descended with mathematical perfection, its exterior a blend of crystalline structures and adaptive biomechanical technology that defied human understanding. The craft didn't so much land as it seemed to dissolve the boundary between sky and ground, settling onto a carefully prepared landing pad with zero displacement of surrounding grass. "Containment protocols are active," announced Dr. Rachel Williams, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface. "Atmospheric composition, radiation levels, gravitational interactions, all within acceptable parameters." The assembled team represented humanity's best and brightest. Military precision mixed with scientific curiosity, each member carefully selected for their ability to navigate the most unprecedented moment in human history. Rodriguez appreciated the diversity, not just of background, but of thought. Diplomacy had evolved far beyond the monolithic approaches of previous centuries. A soft hydraulic whisper marked the vessel's external membrane beginning to reconfigure. Dr. Michael Thompson, the team's lead psychologist, leaned forward almost imperceptibly. Years of studying alien communication patterns had prepared him for this moment, yet something in the air felt different, unpredictable. The ship's exterior shimmered, molecules realigning in a display that challenged human understanding of material science. Where most would see an alien craft, Thompson saw a complex system of communication. Every movement, every subtle shift potentially laden with meaning. Zorax emerged precisely 17 seconds after initial landing, a duration that Rodriguez later determined was intentionally calculated to create a specific psychological impact. His form defied easy description, not quite humanoid, not entirely alien. Tentacular appendages moved with a grace that suggested both intelligence and a completely foreign evolutionary path. The diplomatic protocols were clear. First contact required a delicate balance of respect, curiosity, and measured caution. But protocols were human constructs, and Zorax represented something beyond any predetermined script. "Greetings," he communicated, not through sound, but through a complex neurological transmission that hit the human team like a subtle wave of understanding. Each listener heard the message slightly differently, filtered through their individual psychological landscape. Rodriguez stepped forward, her military bearing a stark contrast to the aliens' fluid movements. "Welcome to Earth," she responded, her voice steady, her eyes never breaking contact. Dr. Williams monitored a complex array of sensors. Electromagnetic readings fluctuated in patterns that suggested communication happening on levels far beyond verbal exchange. Quantum entanglement, neural network synchronization, atmospheric ion interactions. The data was beautiful in its complexity. Thompson watched Zorax with the keen interest of someone observing a profound psychological experiment. The alien's body language, if one could call it that, suggested a mixture of confidence and something else. Curiosity, uncertainty. The nuances were maddeningly complex. "Your arrival has been anticipated," Rodriguez continued, her statement hanging in the air like a carefully crafted instrument. "We are prepared to engage in comprehensive dialogue." Zorax's response came not just as words, but as a holographic projection that erupted from his body, a three-dimensional representation of galactic diplomatic history. Civilizations rose and fell in compressed timelines, showing humanity exactly where they fit in the broader cosmic narrative. But something was different. The projection felt less like a presentation and more like a challenge. Michael Thompson noticed it first, a subtle psychological undertone that suggested the alien was not just presenting information. He was testing humanity's response. Every movement, Every projected image was a probe, searching for something beyond standard diplomatic interaction. Emily Rodriguez felt it too. This was not a typical first contact scenario. This was a confrontation, intellectual, psychological, evolutionary. The Swiss morning continued around them, indifferent to the momentous interaction unfolding. Grass swayed, distant mountains watched, and humanity stood on the precipice of a transformation it could not yet comprehend. The conference room at the United Nations headquarters buzzed with an energy that transcended typical diplomatic protocols. Zorax occupied the central position, his biomechanical form casting prismatic reflections across the polished surfaces. Around him, a carefully selected team of human representatives studied their extraterrestrial guest with a mixture of scientific curiosity and strategic caution. Dr. Michael Thompson leaned forward, his psychological training working overtime. Every micro-movement, every subtle shift in the alien's form was a potential window into an entirely new form of communication. The standard diplomatic playbook meant nothing here. "We appreciate the comprehensive historical projection you shared in Geneva," began Ambassador Jennifer Nakamura, her voice calm and measured. "But we're interested in understanding the present context of your visit." Zorax's response was not a simple verbal communication. Instead, a holographic representation erupted from his central mass, a complex network of interconnected civilizations, pulsing with lines of communication, trade, and conflict. It was less a presentation and more of a living, breathing map of galactic interactions. Dr. Rachel Williams, the team's lead xenotechnologist, studied the projection with intense concentration. Her fingers moved across an advanced tablet, capturing every nuanced detail. "The interconnectivity is remarkable," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. The alien's communication method was deliberate. Each projection, each neural transmission seemed carefully constructed to provoke a specific psychological response. Thompson recognized it immediately. This was not just information sharing. This was a test. Colonel Jack Harrison, representing global military coordination, remained deliberately positioned near the room's security systems. His posture was relaxed but predatory. A veteran of numerous international negotiations who understood the subtle dance of power dynamics. "Your Galactic Council seems to operate on a principle of collaborative governance," Ambassador Nakamura probed, "but I'm curious about the decision-making processes. How are conflicts resolved?" The holographic projection shifted. Civilizations that had previously appeared interconnected now showed fault lines, subtle tensions, historical conflicts, complex negotiation patterns that suggested a far more nuanced system than simple diplomatic exchanges. Dr. Thompson saw something else. Between the lines of the projection, there was a psychological landscape, a complex emotional terrain that suggested the Galactic Council was far more than a political body. It was a living, breathing entity with its own form of collective consciousness. Zorax's response came as a multi-layered communication, part neural transmission, part holographic representation, part something that defied human categorization. The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees as the alien's full communicative capabilities became apparent. "Conflict is a state of potential," the transmission suggested, "not a terminal condition." The human team exchanged glances. The statement was simultaneously profound and deliberately obscure, a classic diplomatic maneuver that suggested layers of meaning beyond the immediate interpretation. Colonel Harrison's hand unconsciously moved closer to a secure communication device. Years of military training had taught him that the most dangerous moments often came disguised as peaceful interactions. Dr. Williams' tablet began registering extraordinary data points. The alien's communication was generating quantum-level interactions that challenged current scientific understanding. Each transmission was not just a message, it was a complex mathematical equation, a living algorithm of communication. "We are interested in your species' approach to systemic challenges," Zorax communicated, the holographic projection now showing human historical moments of conflict, resolution, and transformation. The projection was brutal in its honesty. World wars, social revolutions, environmental challenges, humanity's history was laid bare, not as a judgment, but as a complex study of adaptive capabilities. Ambassador Nakamura recognized the strategy immediately. This was not an assessment. This was a profound psychological probe, examining humanity's capacity for change, for survival, for transformation. Dr. Thompson watched the interaction with growing excitement. This was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was a species-level psychological examination, with humanity as both the subject and the examiner. The conference room, with its bulletproof windows and advanced security systems, suddenly felt inadequate. The real interaction was happening on levels that transcended physical space, a complex dance of psychological potential, of evolutionary possibilities. Zorax waited. The human team processed, and between them, a new form of communication was being born, something that would reshape understanding of consciousness, diplomacy, and the very nature of intelligent interaction. The meeting had only just begun. The Museum of Human Experience was unlike anything Zorax had encountered in his extensive galactic travels. Located in a restored industrial complex on the outskirts of New York City, the facility was a living archive of human transformation, pain, and resilience. Dr. Emily Rodriguez guided the alien through exhibits that defied simple categorization. Each display was a complex psychological landscape, challenging every preconceived notion of sentient experience. The first gallery focused on human conflict resolution. Zorax observed intricate displays showing how communities had rebuilt after devastating wars, genocides, and social upheavals. It wasn't just a historical record. It was a living testament to psychological adaptation. A holographic installation caught the aliens' attention. Veterans from different conflicts sat in a circle, sharing experiences that transcended national boundaries. An American soldier spoke about serving in Afghanistan. A former child soldier from Sierra Leone described his path to healing, and a Vietnamese refugee shared her journey of reconciliation. "We do not simply survive," whispered Dr. Rodriguez, sensing the alien's deep psychological scanning. "We transform." The next exhibit shattered Zorax's understanding of emotional processing. An entire wing was dedicated to art created during periods of extreme human suffering. Paintings made in concentration camps, poetry written by prisoners, music composed in moments of absolute despair. Each piece radiated an incomprehensible resilience. A series of photographs documented the civil rights movement. Images of peaceful protests juxtaposed against violent resistance revealed a complex narrative of human social evolution. Zorax's neural pathways struggled to process the nuanced emotional landscape. Dr. Michael Thompson, accompanying the tour, recognized the alien's internal struggle. "Most species would break under such systemic oppression," he explained. "Humans reimagine themselves. We turn pain into progress." The museum's sound installation became overwhelming. Recordings of human music played simultaneously, a cacophony that somehow resolved into a coherent emotional narrative. Classical symphonies merged with jazz improvisations, protest songs intertwined with children's lullabies. Zorax experienced something unprecedented. The human emotional spectrum was not a linear experience, but a multidimensional quantum state of continuous transformation. A veteran named Jack Williams joined the tour, his prosthetic leg a testament to human technological and psychological adaptation. He shared stories of rehabilitation, of finding purpose after devastating injuries. "Loss is not an endpoint," Williams explained. "It's a transition." The psychological complexity was staggering. Where other species might have been destroyed by similar experiences, humans seemed to generate energy from their challenges. Each traumatic experience became a source of innovation, of deeper understanding. Dr. Rodriguez led Zorax to a final exhibit, a wall of global problem-solving initiatives, climate change solutions, medical innovations, educational programs that emerged from communities facing impossible challenges. Each project was a living proof of human potential. "We are not defined by our limitations," she said, her voice carrying the weight of collective human experience. "We are defined by our capacity to reimagine ourselves." The aliens' neural systems were experiencing what humans might call an emotional breakdown. But for Zorax, it was a fundamental reconstruction of understanding. Humanity was not just a species. It was a dynamic process of continuous reinvention. A young researcher named Sarah Martinez approached, carrying a portfolio of community art projects. She showed Zorax how local communities used creative expression to heal from collective traumas, a concept that had no equivalent in galactic diplomatic records. "We turn our wounds into windows," Martinez explained, showing a collaborative mural created by survivors of different global conflicts. Pain becomes connection. The museum tour concluded, but the psychological impact was just beginning. Zorax realized that human communication transcended verbal or technological exchanges. It was a complex quantum state of emotional and intellectual adaptation. Dr. Thompson watched the aliens' reactions with professional fascination. "What you're experiencing," he said quietly, "is the true language of our species. Not words, not technology, but our capacity to transform." As evening fell over the city, the museum's lights created a cathedral of human experience. Zorax stood motionless, his entire understanding of sentient existence fundamentally and irrevocably altered. Humanity was not just a species to be studied. It was a revolutionary concept in psychological evolution. The United Nations Simulation Center hummed with an energy that defied conventional diplomatic preparation. Zorax found himself thrust into a scenario designed to test the absolute limits of adaptive thinking, a complex human exercise that was part psychological assessment, part strategic challenge. Dr. Michael Thompson watched from the observation deck, his fingers hovering over a complex array of monitoring equipment. "This isn't just a test," he muttered to Colonel Jack Harrison. "This is a complete deconstruction of predictive reasoning." The scenario began simply enough. A simulated global crisis, environmental collapse, technological disruption, social unrest. Standard parameters that would typically reduce most galactic species to paralysis. The human team assembled looked almost amused by the initial setup. Ambassador Jennifer Nakamura took the lead, her movements deliberate and measured. Beside her, Dr. Rachel Williams began manipulating holographic data streams with an almost musical precision. Each team member seemed to occupy a unique psychological space, while simultaneously maintaining a collective awareness. Zorax's neural receptors struggled to process the human approach. Where other species would create hierarchical decision-making structures, these humans operated like a living, breathing neural network. Ideas bounced between team members with quantum-like unpredictability. The first unexpected turn came 17 minutes into the simulation. A junior researcher named Carlos Rodriguez introduced a completely lateral solution that violated every established diplomatic protocol. Instead of addressing the environmental crisis through traditional resource allocation, he proposed a community-driven adaptive management system that transformed the entire problem framework. "We're not solving the problem," Rodriguez explained, his holographic presentation dancing with complex algorithms. "We're reimagining our relationship with the problem." Colonel Harrison leaned closer to the observation window. "Watch closely," he told Thompson. "This is where human potential becomes truly terrifying." The simulation began to evolve in ways that defied computational prediction. Each human team member seemed to operate as both an individual and a collective entity. They weren't just solving the crisis, they were deconstructing the very concept of crisis management. Dr. Williams' data analysis revealed something extraordinary. The team was generating solutions faster than any known computational system could process. It wasn't just rapid problem solving. It was a form of collective consciousness that emerged spontaneously. Zorax experienced what humans might call an existential tremor. The boundaries between individual and collective, between problem and solution, were becoming dangerously fluid. A second unexpected twist emerged. When the simulation introduced a complete communication breakdown, The human team didn't panic. Instead, they began developing entirely new communication protocols in real time. Languages, algorithmic translations, emotional mapping, all became tools of connection. Conflict is just unprocessed connection, muttered Ambassador Nakamura, her fingers dancing across a complex linguistic translation matrix. Dr. Thompson recognized the profound psychological mechanism at work. Most species would break under such systemic complexity. Humans seemed to generate energy from uncertainty. The simulation reached a critical point. Traditional diplomatic models would have collapsed, but the human team was doing something entirely different. They were not just solving the problem, they were fundamentally redesigning the system of problem-solving. Carlos Rodriguez introduced a wild card, a community-driven technological solution that integrated local knowledge with advanced computational modeling. It was less a technical fix and more a complete reimagining of human-environmental interaction. Colonel Harrison felt a familiar excitement. This was why humans were considered unpredictable. They didn't just adapt, they transformed. Zorax's neural systems were experiencing what humans might call an emotional overload. The team wasn't just thinking outside the box, they were deconstructing the very concept of the box. As the simulation reached its final stages, the human team had not just solved the initial crisis. They had generated multiple adaptive solutions, created new collaborative frameworks, and essentially redesigned their entire approach to global challenges. Dr. Thompson turned to Zorax, his eyes reflecting a mixture of scientific excitement and profound respect. "This is humanity," he said quietly. "Not our technology, not our individual capabilities, but our capacity to reimagine ourselves in real time." The observation room fell silent. The simulation ended, but something fundamental had changed. Zorax understood now that humanity was not a species to be categorized. It was a dynamic process of continuous reinvention. The boundaries of possibility had just been redrawn. The private conference room felt smaller with each passing moment. Jack Williams, a veteran whose life story had become a turning point in the aliens' understanding of human experience, sat across from Zorax. The room's advanced soundproofing created an intimate psychological arena where the most profound confrontation would unfold. "I lost my entire squad in Afghanistan," Williams began, his prosthetic hand resting on the table with deliberate calm. "But that's not the most important part of my story." Zorax's neural receptors began to tremble. The human's communication was unlike anything in galactic diplomatic records, a living, breathing narrative that defied standard information transfer. Williams continued, his voice a carefully modulated instrument of psychological revelation. "Most people think trauma is something you overcome, but for me, it became a pathway to understanding, to connection." The veteran's story unfolded like a quantum entanglement of pain and transformation. Each word was a complex neural transmission that challenged the very foundations of Zorax's understanding of sentient experience. Dr. Michael Thompson observed from a secondary monitoring station, his professional fascination barely contained. The psychological interaction happening in the room was unprecedented, a direct neural assault of human resilience. Williams described the moment everything changed, not the battlefield trauma, but the aftermath. How he discovered that his pain could be transformed into a bridge of understanding. He had become a counselor, working with veterans from different conflicts, different nations, different generations. "We are not defined by what happens to us," Williams explained, his eyes locked with the alien's sensory organs. "We are defined by how we choose to metabolize our experiences." Zorax experienced something beyond comprehension. The human's narrative was not just a story. It was a living, breathing algorithm of psychological transformation. Dr. Rachel Williams, no relation to Jack, monitored the neural interactions. The data streams were unlike anything in scientific records. It was as if the veteran's words were rewriting the very fabric of neural communication. Jack continued, describing the support group he founded. Veterans from opposing sides of global conflicts, brought together not by diplomatic agreements, but by the shared experience of profound loss. Americans sitting beside former insurgents, Russian veterans alongside Chechen fighters. Each story a testament to human capacity for empathy. Healing is not about forgetting, he said. It's about creating meaning. Zorax's neural pathways began to destabilize. The human concept of trauma was not a linear process of recovery. It was a quantum state of continuous transformation. The veteran's final story broke something fundamental in the alien's understanding. He described adopting a child from a conflict zone, a child who had lost everything. Not as an act of charity, but as a profound act of human connection. We rebuild, Williams said, not just ourselves, but entire ecosystems of human experience. Dr. Thompson recognized the moment of neural fracture. Zorax was experiencing a complete reconstruction of understanding. Humanity was not just a species. It was a revolutionary concept of consciousness. The monitoring equipment began to show extraordinary readings. Zorax's neural systems were experiencing what humans might call an emotional breakdown. But it was more profound, a fundamental reconstruction of the concept of sentient experience. Colonel Emily Rodriguez, observing from a secure location, understood the significance. This was not just a diplomatic encounter. This was a species-level psychological transformation. Jack Williams fell silent. The story was complete, but its impact was just beginning. Zorax's form began to shimmer, a visual representation of internal neural reconfiguration. The alien was not just listening. The alien was being fundamentally rewritten by human experience. We are not our wounds, Williams said softly. We are the bridges we built from them. The room remained silent, but something fundamental had changed. The boundaries of understanding had been redrawn. Humanity had just revealed its most profound weapon, not technology, not physical strength, but the capacity to transform pain into connection. Dr. Thompson turned to the monitoring team. We've just witnessed something extraordinary, he said quietly. A complete deconstruction of interspecies understanding. Zorax remained motionless, but everything had changed. The isolation chamber glowed with a soft blue light, designed to minimize external stimuli, while monitoring Zorax's unprecedented neural breakdown. Dr. Rachel Williams watched through multiple layers of advanced observation systems, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that tracked quantum-level neural fluctuations. We're witnessing something beyond standard medical understanding, she murmured to Dr. Michael Thompson, who stood beside her with an intensity that bordered on religious reverence. Zorax's biomechanical form pulsed with irregular rhythms. What had begun as a diplomatic mission had transformed into a complete systemic deconstruction of alien consciousness. The medical team had never encountered anything like this, a sentient being literally being rewritten by psychological exposure. Colonel Emily Rodriguez reviewed the initial reports. This is more than a breakdown, she noted. It's a fundamental reconstruction of consciousness. The aliens' neural pathways were experiencing what humans might call a total system reboot. Memories, diplomatic protocols, galactic understanding. Everything was being processed through a new lens of emotional complexity that defied previous comprehension. Dr. Thompson recognized the profound mechanism at work. Humans don't just process information, he explained to the assembled team. We metabolize experience. We turn pain into understanding, limitation into possibility. Medical scans showed extraordinary neural activity. Where most species would experience complete system failure, Zorax was generating new neural connections at an unprecedented rate. It was as if human experience was a type of psychological catalyst, transforming the very nature of sentient perception. Jack Williams, the veteran whose story had triggered this transformation, watched from a secure observation area. We're more than our programming, he said quietly. We're our capacity to reimagine ourselves. The isolation chamber became a crucible of consciousness. Holographic projections of human experiences flickered around Zorax, moments of profound loss, incredible resilience, unexpected connection. Each memory was a neural pathway, each experience a potential transformation. Dr. Williams tracked the data with scientific precision. "The neural restructuring is unprecedented," she announced. "It's not just adaptation. It's a complete reimagining of cognitive potential." Zorax's form began to shimmer, molecular structures realigning in ways that challenged understanding. The diplomatic mission had become something entirely different, a species-level communication that transcended traditional information exchange. Ambassador Jennifer Nakamura understood the significance. "This is why humans are considered unpredictable," she told the observation team. "We don't just adapt. We transform entire systems of understanding." The medical team watched in a mixture of terror and profound respect. Zorax was not breaking down. The alien was being rebuilt by the pure potential of human psychological complexity. Holographic memories continued to swirl. A child learning to walk after losing limbs, communities rebuilding after devastating hurricanes, individuals finding purpose in the aftermath of complete personal destruction. Each moment was a neural transmission of pure human potential. Dr. Thompson leaned closer to the observation window. "We are not defined by our limitations," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We are defined by our capacity to reimagine ourselves in real time." The isolation chamber became a living laboratory of consciousness. Zorax's neural systems were generating new forms of perception, new ways of understanding connection, pain, and possibility. Colonel Rodriguez felt a familiar excitement. This was why humans were considered the most dangerous and most promising species in the galactic landscape, not for their technology, not for their physical capabilities, but for their ability to transform fundamental understanding. Hours passed. The neural restructuring continued. Medical teams tracked extraordinary developments, new forms of cognitive processing that defied previous understanding of consciousness. "We're watching the birth of a new form of understanding," Dr. Williams announced, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and profound wonder. Jack Williams understood something deeper. "Healing is not about returning to what was," he said quietly. "It's about becoming something entirely new." As the observation team watched, Zorax's form began to stabilize. But nothing would ever be the same. The boundaries of consciousness had been redrawn. Humanity had just revealed its most profound capability, the ability to transform not just individual experience, but entire systems of understanding. The isolation chamber hummed with potential. Something extraordinary was emerging. The Galactic Council chamber fell into an uncharacteristic silence as Zorax began his transmission. His form was different now, subtly altered, vibrating with a complexity that defied previous understanding of diplomatic communication. Ambassador Krelnax, the senior council representative, leaned forward with a mixture of anticipation and growing unease. Diplomatic reports were typically clinical, methodical, predictable. This would be something entirely different. Zorax's neural transmission began not with standard protocol, but with a human story. The narrative of Jack Williams, the veteran who transformed personal trauma into a bridge of understanding, became the opening salvo of an unprecedented report. Humanity is not a species to be categorized. The transmission began. They are a living algorithm of psychological transformation. The holographic displays around the council chamber began to shift, generating complex visual representations that defied standard informational protocols. Images of human resilience, of communities rebuilding, of individuals transforming pain into purpose, cascaded through the chamber. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the human diplomatic liaison assigned to the Galactic Council, watched with a carefully measured expression. She understood the profound significance of this moment. Zorax's report dismantled every previous understanding of human potential. Where previous assessments had categorized humans as an emerging technological species, this transmission revealed something far more profound, a revolutionary concept of consciousness. Traditional diplomatic models are insufficient. The transmission continued. Humans do not solve problems. They reimagine entire systems of understanding. The council members experienced something unprecedented. Zorax was not just reporting. He was being transformed in real time, his very method of communication altered by human experience. Ambassador Krelnax felt the first tremors of a fundamental challenge to galactic diplomatic understanding. This was more than a report. This was a complete reconstruction of interspecies communication. Holographic displays showed moments of human complexity. A young researcher developing a community-driven environmental solution. A group of veterans from opposing conflicts finding connection. Children in war-torn regions creating art that transformed trauma. Humanity's primary technology is not mechanical, Zorax transmitted. It is their capacity to metabolize experience, to turn limitation into possibility. The report defied every standard diplomatic communication protocol. It was part scientific analysis, part emotional landscape, part philosophical revelation. Dr. Rodriguez recognized the profound mechanism at work. Zorax was not just reporting on humanity. He was becoming a living translation of human potential. Specific diplomatic recommendations emerged, but they were unlike any previous galactic assessment. Humanity should not be contained or controlled. Their primary value is their psychological adaptability. Traditional diplomatic models are fundamentally insufficient to understand their potential. The council chamber became a living ecosystem of information. Each council member experienced the transmission differently, their neural pathways challenged by the complexity of the report. We are witnessing a species-level communication event, transmitted a senior xenopsychological analyst. Zorax shared stories, not just data points, but living narratives of human transformation. A child learning to walk after losing limbs, a community rebuilding after environmental devastation, individuals finding purpose in the aftermath of profound loss. Ambassador Krelnax felt something unprecedented. Fear, excitement, a fundamental challenge to galactic understanding. The transmission continued, revealing humanity's true potential, not as a technological species, not as a potential threat or resource, but as a revolutionary concept of consciousness itself. Humanity does not adapt, the final transmission revealed. They continuously reimagine the very concept of adaptation. Dr. Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest smile. This was why humans were considered the most unpredictable species in the galactic landscape. As the transmission concluded, the Galactic Council sat in profound silence. Something fundamental had changed. The boundaries of understanding had been redrawn. Humanity was no longer just another species to be categorized. They were a living, breathing revolution of consciousness. 5 years had passed since the extraordinary first contact. Zorax was no longer simply an ambassador. He had become something entirely unprecedented in galactic history. The small research facility in New Mexico stood as a testament to a new form of interspecies communication. Surrounded by desert landscapes that seemed to echo the vastness of cosmic potential, the building housed what had become known as the Transformation Institute. Dr. Michael Thompson watched Zorax move through the facility's communal spaces. The alien's form had changed dramatically, now displaying a fluidity that suggested continuous psychological evolution. Where once there were rigid biomechanical structures, now existed a being that seemed to breathe with the same adaptive quality as human consciousness. Jack Williams, the veteran whose story had initially triggered Zorax's transformation, worked closely with the alien. Their collaboration had become a living laboratory of cross-species understanding. "We're not just studying communication," Williams would often say. "We're reimagining the very concept of connection." The Galactic Council's initial shock had transformed into a complex mixture of fascination and cautious respect. Humanity had been reclassified, no longer a potential threat or a developing species, but a fundamental force of psychological innovation. Dr. Rachel Williams monitored the ongoing research, her holographic displays showing extraordinary developments. Zorax had become more than an individual entity. He was a living bridge between species, a demonstration of consciousness that transcended biological limitations. Ambassador Jennifer Nakamura oversaw the diplomatic implications. The institute was not just a research facility. It was a new form of interstellar diplomacy, one based on psychological exchange rather than traditional territorial or technological negotiations. Zorax began to speak, his communication now a complex multimedia transmission that defied previous understanding of language. Consciousness is not a state, he communicated. It is a continuous process of transformation. The facility had become a pilgrimage site for researchers, diplomats, and thinkers from across the galaxy. Each visitor experienced something profound, a fundamental challenge to their understanding of sentient potential. Colonel Emily Rodriguez, now leading advanced diplomatic initiatives, recognized the deeper significance. Humanity had done something extraordinary. They had not conquered another species. They had transformed the very concept of species interaction. Research teams from multiple planets studied the unprecedented phenomenon. How had a single species managed to fundamentally reshape an advanced diplomatic entity? The answer lay in humanity's unique capacity for empathy, for psychological adaptation, for turning limitation into possibility. Zorax shared stories, not as information, but as living neural transmissions. Each narrative was a complex ecosystem of experience, challenging everything known about communication. The Institute's work expanded. Programs developed to help species process collective trauma, to find connection across seemingly insurmountable differences. What had begun as a diplomatic mission had become a revolutionary approach to consciousness itself. Jack Williams reflected on the journey. "We're not fixing anything," he would explain to visiting researchers. "We're creating space for transformation." Dr. Thompson observed the ongoing research with a mixture of scientific precision and profound wonder. Zorax was no longer just an individual. He had become a living demonstration of humanity's most profound capability, the ability to fundamentally reimagine understanding. The desert outside seemed to pulse with potential. The facility was more than a research center. It was a beacon of a new form of cosmic interaction. Diplomatic protocols from across the galaxy were being rewritten. Traditional models of species interaction collapsed in the face of this new understanding. Humanity's greatest technology, Zorax would communicate, is not found in machines or weapons. It is the capacity to transform pain into connection, to see potential where others see limitation. As night fell, the facility's lights created a complex pattern against the desert landscape, a visual representation of the intricate neural pathways that now connected species, experiences, entire ways of understanding. Something fundamental had changed. The boundaries of consciousness had been redrawn, and humanity had just begun to explore its true potential.